Welcome, Cloud Gurus, to this new show on tech. I am Lars Klint, and this time on the first episode, we're going to talk about augmented reality. I bet you'll see some stuff that you haven't seen before, and I might just give you a tip or two on what you can actually use this stuff for, both commercially and as a developer. Like, what do they actually do, and what are they good at, what are they not so good at? Where can you use them? Are you enterprise? Are you developer? Are you a customer? Doesn't matter, we'll talk about all of that. Also a bit of background about the devices. It's all coming up on this pilot episode of Future of Tech. Now, before we start looking at these beautiful devices, let's just talk a little bit about the background of augmented reality. Now, it wasn't that long ago, actually, that it started. It's about early 90s, thereabouts, that the American military had a good idea they called virtual fixtures. Now, they wanted to be able to remotely control a robot or some sort of machinery. And they came up with this idea of wearing an exoskeleton or like a piece of scaffolding from the user and then remotely control the hands of this robot. Now, in order to do that, you wear this thing and they overlay the actual hands of the robot digitally. So when you control it, it looked like it was your hands controlling. It was very cool, very convincing, and it worked well for probably bomb disposal scenarios or something kind of dangerous, which is what they wanted to use it for. Now, the first kind of what we know as augmented reality experience came in the form of phones, right? So it was very basic, very, very simple kind of ideas that allowed you to have augmentation of your reality. So you took your smartphone and you had a trigger point or some sort of character or symbol that would trigger the experience. So you point your phone at it. Could be a QR code, for example, or it could be a picture of a boat. And this boat would then, for example, come to life on the phone. So you'd get this sort of 3D nice image as an augmentation of the reality, hence the word augmented reality. And it was very powerful and it was very convincing if you were going to buy, say, a luxury yacht, because this would bob on top of the sales brochure or whatever. But it was kind of limited, very simple, very basic. And it was all dependent on this kind of symbol to generate the experience. Now, the next thing that came along, sort of probably about 5 years ago, was what we call Google Glass. In about 2013, 2012, there were rumors of this new head-worn device. And why this was particularly groundbreaking was that you had your hands free. So you wore these glasses, or these Google glasses, and you were seeing through one eye, you had an augmentation of reality. But it let you use your hands. And everything was voice command controlled, and you could take pictures of the environments. You can get GPS coordinates, you can get GPS navigation instructions. All that sort of thing were available with the Google Glass. It was really good for production lines as well. Tesla cars used it for a long time. I think they're still using it actually for just-in-time information on what was available on the production line, if they were running out, if they were on schedule, all this sort of stuff in real time. Again, you had your hands free to do whatever you needed to do. Essentially, that was a heads-up display. It didn't do much other than show some information in front of the user that was not really dependent on the environment, but more just of what the user was seeing. Now, just to compare with that, we have virtual reality, and we're not going to talk about virtual reality today as such, but it's important to know what it is in relation to augmented reality. So virtual reality is a much, much older concept. It actually started about 200 years ago with something called stereoscopic images, which is like your 3D glasses today. You had two images, they overlay each other, and you got this sort of virtual imagery experience a long time ago. Fast forward to about the mid-80s, and it was being used with big headsets, large supercomputers at the time. And it's probably like this, actually, today's power. And there was both commercial experiences and there was some consumer experiences where you can go around and shoot each other with 8-bit arrows. It was all very cool in the 80s. But it kind of died out a little bit and has recently got a revival with what we know as the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift, PlayStation VR, and there's a lot more devices coming. Something like Google Cardboard. You put your phone inside a piece of cardboard, your Android phone, and it effectively splits your screen up into two, one for each eye, and you can look through this cardboard contraption. Very accessible. Very cheap to use, very easy as a developer to develop for. But we're not going to talk much more about virtual reality today because we're focusing on this, augmented reality. So now we talked about the background, the history of these devices, but the present day is, well, it's much more interesting, I think. So what's happening now is that we have more of a spectrum, really, of where AR and VR fits in. So you can say one end of the spectrum you have pure AR, so that's where you have just an overlay of data that sits on top of the real world. as digital assets that you can see. The other end of the spectrum, you have VR, virtual reality, where you remove everything the user sees and completely reinvent what their world is. It's completely designed. But what's happening more and more is that devices are moving between the two. So something like the HTC Vive now has little cameras that you put up behind it that will track where you are in a particular playing space. And everything's moving more and more towards this, that you can interact with the environment that you're in, whether it's AR or VR. And as these things move together in the middle, it becomes what's known as mixed reality. And mixed reality is a broad spectrum that goes from one end to the other. Some of them are more VR focused, some are more AR focused, but everything is kind of redefined. So what's happening now with modern devices is that devices like the modern Android phones and your iPhones are building devices that will let you use AR as mixed reality. So they still call it augmented reality, even though it's moving towards the middle of the spectrum. From Apple, it's AR Kit, and from Google, it's AR Core. And these are two technologies that consumers necessarily don't know about, but they know what they do, right? The Apple device, is, in particular, I want to show you a really cool app from IKEA, of all places, that lets you place furniture in your room. Now, it's not just furniture, it's any kind of IKEA furniture, but it's not real. So let's place some furniture in the room. I like this couch. It's a very nice couch. So let's move it. We'll see. We can move it with here, move it over here, or kind of swivel it around, and we can place it there with a little tap. Now if I move away a bit, you can see that I can see the whole of this couch in real time. It's in my space. Now it's not super accurate yet, because the mapping of the room may be a little bit off, so it doesn't know exactly where all the floors are. But you get the idea. So that's AR Kit from Apple. AR Core from Android or from Google works very much in the same way. It uses just the hardware that's in here, so it's your gyroscope, your accelerometer, the camera, and it fixes points, or it finds points that it can place in the real space, such as corners of the table or whatever it might be, and it'll then use that for tracking. So that means you can place things on the table or on the floor in real time. It's very powerful. VR is also going towards more of a mixed reality space. What's happening now is that I've seen an example where you can have what's called the Magic Leap. So Magic Leap is a finger tracking device, essentially. Very accurate tracking of your fingers. If you combine that with virtual reality, you can suddenly see your real fingers or real hands in the virtual reality space. And I've seen an example where someone picks a virtual flower, so it's in the virtual reality world, with their real hand. It blows your socks off, both of them. The best example at the moment for mixed reality that I can think of, and is a bit of a passion of mine, I agree, is this little buddy here, right? So this is the Microsoft HoloLens. It's a self-contained unit, so there's nothing else needed to run it except what I have in my hand. And it's called mixed reality because it mixes your real world and your digital world very cleverly. So on it here, there are some environmental cameras at the top. There's 4 of them. And they'll map your room or your space in real time. So it'll give you a very precise 3D representation of your space. That will then live inside the HoloLens, and you can place things on it. So you can suddenly start interacting digitally with the physical space. As an example, I have a physical table here. If I place a digital ball on it, and it just sits there, if I were to tip the table and change essentially the gravity on it, or the forces on it, the ball would roll off. The digital ball would roll off the real table. That is really powerful.
All right, opening holograms.
Ready to start. Nice move.
This device is the only one of its kind currently. Nothing else on the market will map the environment in real time to that degree. And it opens up a whole bunch of new avenues of improvement. So for industry, if you're in healthcare, for example, you can use this to overlay surgical tools that are inside the patient, so you can see exactly where they are at all times. Now, this is still experimental, obviously. This is not something that's in real world right now, but it's coming. If you're in an engineering plant, you can recognize objects, so you can use a service called Vuforia, for example. It has an API that you can use for your development and let you recognize specific images or specific 3D objects and suddenly have actions based on that. For example, in a manufacturing environment, you can get performance figures for that particular machine. You can get maintenance schedules or whatever it might be that you need in that particular scenario. Very, very powerful device. Coming on from this, so this is mixed reality as well. This is mixing, obviously, digital and physical. Now, there's other devices as well, which are these called Windows mixed reality headsets. And thank you, Microsoft, for being very, very confusing naming convention, because these are nothing like the HoloLens. The HoloLens is about $3,000 US. These are about $300. As you can tell, there's a tether on it. You've got to plug it into a computer that's got to have a reasonably powerful graphics card, most of all, but also RAM and processing power. So they're not standalone. They do require some equipment to run. These are more like virtual reality. They're called mixed reality because it actually tracks your movement. It'll know where you are in relation to your computer that's running it. But for all intents and purposes, these are virtual reality experience. This is what's being pushed right now. This is also running Windows 10. It's using the same apps as the HoloLens to a large extent. And the development environment is kind of almost there, not quite, but you are developing the same way for both, using Unity and Visual Studio. And this is a good advancement in the technology, but it's certainly not anywhere near the level of interaction that the HoloLens can offer. So where this is going is all part of the future talk, I guess. We also have controllers that comes with the virtual reality, just said virtual reality, right? The mixed reality headsets, and these are amazing. Like, I tried the Vive controllers initially, they were okay. These are 100% accurate. Like, if you wear this, if you put this on, wear it, and you look down, you'll see exactly where the controller is in full 3D object, and you can just pick it up like it was there. It's very, very impressive. So it has moved a long way for relatively low cost. So that's kind of where we are now. That's kind of what we're doing today. We got the HoloLens, we got mixed reality headsets, we got the Vive is coming out with a Pro Edition. There's going to be a wireless Oculus Rift as well, so we're going to get away from the tethers, which is very important, I think. And we're going to have a much more interactive, let's say, roadmap for these experiences. It is here to stay. This is not going anywhere. Devices are going to get smaller, cheaper, easier to develop for. That's essentially where we are today. Now, obviously, we can't have a show called Future of Tech if we're not talking about the future. So before we talked about a bit, the present, what these devices do, but where is it all headed, right? What is actually going to happen from now on? So there's a really interesting company in the AR space called Magic Leap. And they're a bit of a mysterious rainbow unicorn secretive ninja company because they've raised an obscene amount of money, about $2.5 billion, something like that. And they still haven't produced anything that is available to consumers or that you can buy. Before Christmas of 2017, they announced that there was going to be a product coming in 2018 called the Magic Leap 1, or just the 1. And it's a really cool device. It looks kind of like a steampunk welding glasses type of thing that you wear. It's got a controller, like a bit smaller than these, and it's got a circular kind of disc that you put in your pocket, right? The imagery that they've shown is very convincing, although also looks a little bit made up, so we're not quite sure exactly where they're going to fit in. But it is very much a device like the HoloLens, which I'm very excited about because I think we need a bit more competition in this space. The Magic Leap 1 promises a lot of interaction with the real world and a much more detailed kind of gesture scenario. It's very promising and it looks very cool. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen in 2018 with that particular product. Speaking of Magic Leap and mixed reality, this is kind of where everything is headed. So the future of tech in this case is going to be a lot more of, remember the spectrum we talked about before? Everything's going to move towards the middle because that's where the real value is in the interaction and the experiences that consumers want. No one really wants a pure VR experience because it's too fake. You get seasick or motion sickness, whatever it might be. Or no one wants a pure AR because it's just data on top of your real world. It's not that interactive. We want to be in the middle somehow. And I think that's where everything's going to go. A couple of interesting devices that are coming is there's a Meta 2 from the Meta company, And this is, you can order it now. It's again a mixed reality device. It's tethered though, which is a little bit disappointing, but I haven't tried it yet. I think it will be all right. The amount of gesture detail you can do with it is unbelievably. So I've talked to gestures about gestures a lot. With HoloLens, you use kind of this gesture all the time, tap. That's about all you can do. You can kind of tap and hold and move your hand around, but that's pretty much it. It's kind of limited, but also easy to remember. The Meta 2 has much more detailed gestures where you can kind of hold things and move them around in 3D, and you have a little toolbox you can grab things out of and put. It's very, very convincing and very cool. And it also allows you actually to interact in real time with other devices. Like they have this whole sort of interaction platform, which looks very, very promising. There's also the Oculus Go. So this is, again, I briefly mentioned before about the untethered version of the Oculus Rift. And this has massive potential. So it still is a VR experience, but because it's untethered, you can have much larger playing areas. You can map out your playing areas to a much larger degree. And that is really exciting as well. I'm keen to see what the battery life is though, because that's always a problem. Of course, there's the HTC Vive Pro, which I mentioned as well, which is also the higher resolution. I think they're going to 4K now, and they have an untethered version as far as I'm aware as well. So it's all kind of going towards the mixed reality idea of free movement and one device for everything and not having to hook anything up. What does this look like in actual implementation? Like, where's this going? What are you going to do with this stuff in the future? Now, there's different industries, obviously, that can benefit from it in different ways. Imagine you're at a coffee shop, and today you kind of look up behind the coffee shop on the blackboard, and there's some prices on this is your latte, and there's your muffin and your banana bread, or whatever it is that you buy at your coffee shop. Imagine if they didn't have to update that and you just needed your phone or your glasses or whatever it might be that the AI experience is coming through. And you look at this and it recognizes where you are, because GPS obviously, and it then just shows you the menu, or it might be the deal of the day, or it might know that, because it's you're wearing the device, it says, oh, you've been here 10 times before, today you get this special offer, whatever it might be. Little things like that makes your everyday a bit more exciting, a bit more effortless, I guess, because you don't have to stand there and figure out if they got this left or what's available. If we take that one step further, what about, do you remember the movie Minority Report from about 15 years ago? Tom Cruise? If you don't, that's all right. But if you do, you remember this particular scene where he's moving memories around in like thin air, right? There's images floating and he's just kind of going, and he throws it over there and it comes back into the screen and he gets one out of the, everything's kind of like hand gestures. And he's not wearing anything, to augment it and see it, which I think you probably would. But imagine that. Like you'd have 6 screens today and you just have it in one sort of environment, and you've got your coding or your Excel spreadsheet. Oh, probably not Excel, it's a bit boring. But something cool, right? on the screen. And you just kind of move it around with your hands, and you might have a keyboard or you might just use voice commands. I think that's where we're headed, and I think that's very exciting. Another technology that is not really in mainstream media, but I've been following up on quite a bit, is the use of haptics. So haptics from your phone, if it vibrates, that's a haptic feedback. It could be that you're using your fingerprint sensor and it goes, zzz, that's a haptic. Imagine if you had a suit on, a full suit, and everything in it was haptic, or it had some sort of feedback at various places. So if you're doing a zombie game, you get shot and you can feel it zzz, in your arm. Or if you're doing surgery, you can kind of feel the brain matter of the patient. Oh, that's a bit disgusting, isn't it? But you get my drift. Haptics feedback. So feedback in real time from the environment that you are virtually in, or mixed reality in, is really cool. And it is coming. I have seen full suits. It looks a bit like a wetsuit, and it has these sensors in it. There's also gloves that are super, super sensitive. So everything in your fingers you can feel in real time with haptic gloves on. And I think that's a really cool extra step. I'm not exactly sure where that's going to fit in. Are people going to be gaming with a whole suit on? What's going to happen, I'm not sure. But I think it has place there somewhere. It's very cool. So thank you for watching. This show is for you. We want to know if you want to hear about a different theme. Is there something that you want to hear about that you're really passionate about? Did we do something that wasn't right? Have you got questions? Any kind of feedback is very welcome. And we reward it all with holographic kittens as well. Thanks for watching. I'm Lars Klint, and this is The Future of Tech, the show that places me as a hologram in your living room. Goodbye.